Ready? Here we are in Christine's studio with the very sticky door. My name is Christine Barney, and I'm a sculptor in glass and also in fabric. It is so incredible. It's like, yeah, it is a beauty. See, I've been in Jersey City for 30 years. I have a studio on Monmouth Street. I've been making glass for 40 some years, 45 years. I grew up near Corning, New York, and I've spent my whole life around glass. My father worked for Corning Glass in research and development, and so glass is part of my DNA in a certain way. So I have an approach to the material that is based on seeing it throughout my whole life and experiencing going to the museum, going to the Corning Museum of Glass since I was about 8 years old. It's very hard to find your own path in glass because it's a 2,000-year-old material, and it's been done and made and this and that, every process. So the magic of it and the excitement of it can kind of take over how you think in it, or you reach a certain level in it and you say, wow, I've reached that, I've done that. So I started using the photos of glass on fabric and then constructing them. And I found that to be a way of kind of eliminating a lot of process and just going to idea.
Come on in, this is my studio, Sunil Garg, Mana Contemporary, welcome. Hi, how are you? I'm Sunil Garg. You are in my studio at Mana Contemporary in Jersey City. As you can tell, and as you will find out at the show, I've been working with light for close to 10 or 12 years, light-based sculpture. And I love working with light, partly because I think I got fascinated with it because I grew up without any manufactured light, as I call it, only natural light, for the first 7 or 8 years of my life in a farm in India. And a few years back, when I started making sculpture again, the whole idea just serendipitously hit me as to exploring light and seeing if I could manipulate it in different ways. And that has resulted in all sorts of myriad things. In addition to light, I also like movement. And I basically consider myself a ephemeral, impermanent artist, in the sense that I like to see things changing. I like to see people contemplating what will come rather than what is. And so most of my work is impermanent. I program it. It's programmed in a way that what you see right now, you will not see for several years again, in essence, because of if I use multiple elements in light, I can program each with different time cycles, and I don't need to go into the mathematics of it, but that's just what it is. One of the pieces that is in the show is part of a series, although none of the series, as I said, are permanent, so if you look for earlier versions, you'll only find them in photographs, which I call Sleep Fragments series. It kind of occurred, there was a time in my life where I was very stressed because I've not been an artist for all my life. I was a scientist and a corporate executive, and I was very, very stressed out. And one of the exercises I used to do to sort of deal with my stress was when I woke up first thing in the morning, I would sketch whatever I saw, abstract image. And if you focus on it, you will realize that there is a little image in that half a second or second it takes for your eyes to adjust to the light. And I have a bunch of, I used to keep a pad next to my bed, and I would just sketch whatever was there. And when I started sculpting, I started reproducing some of those. I actually found the pad from back in the 1980s. And that's what led to these sort of abstract wire images that I call sleep fragments, because they're kind of parts of your remnants of your sleep. So the second piece is a piece that's the second in a version that I have done of something I call spaceship. And it doesn't look like your concept of spaceship. It's made wholly out of plastic tubes, and looks like, when you look at it, you will see that it looks like large neon tubes, but these are constructed by me. I have no assistants, I do everything myself. So I like to say that I'm actually a farmer's son. So my father worked with his hands for most of his life. And now I work with my hands for my life, even though I practiced law for many years, and before that was a corporate executive, hoping to work with my brain at that time. So the idea of the spaceship is really, it has nothing to do with a ship going to space. It's just based on a melody by a Lebanese composer, Jad Halal, who's this particular melody, I just loved it. He called it Spaceship. And when I play it, I kind of think of this very jumble of colors and things kind of taking off or remnants remaining, and that's what these pieces are. Because part of the idea is to create anticipation. Part of the idea is to get people engrossed a little bit in contemplating what will be and what is to be. And my very modest hope is that by in doing so, people may also contemplate, what's going on in their lives a little bit. But that's what drives me, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, my name is Bryant Gustafson. I'm a sculptor. I live in Jersey City, New Jersey. I've been here for several decades. I come to Jersey through Illinois State, where I spent many years as doing my graduate work and sort of finding what it meant to be an emerging artist. Before that, I spent 9 years in New Orleans, where I got my undergrad at Tulane University. That time was amazing. I spent 9 years where I feel like I sort of really kind of grew up there in many ways, or kind of, that period of time where your personality and experiences kind of form you and inform the rest of your life and whatnot. So looping that all back around, then, I make things with my hands. I can dabble. I love photography. It's a research tool for me. I used to eschew the notion of that, good work makes you feel something, because I always thought that was a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction. I was like, well, it's not hard to make you feel something, right? Let's break it down. And now I sort of want to give that to them more than I used to. My work sits in this spot of agitation, and that's a very common area you'll find for many artists. Somewhere behind it, there's always this agitation, right? And I've always worked from that place. What you have to do is you have to cut off a bit of your empathy sensors. You have to, or otherwise you'd be crushed every day. But then I come along and I go, you know what? I'm not down with that. How do I make an empathy generator? Like, what can I do in my artwork that, forces people that you can't, no matter how far they are away? So, I don't give an answer. I just give a question, and then, leave it with that. So it is. It's like a social media world. I'm just like, do you like it? Is it a thumbs up or is it a thumbs down? Just...
Hi, my name is Valerie. I'm an artist living and working in Flemington, New Jersey. All the neighborhoods I lived in after that, after moving to the city, were lower income neighborhoods, maybe marginalized neighborhoods, and the people that I lived with and I saw every day and I appreciated, and I was part of that community, they were getting killed. And this was a response to this. I think, Trayvon is an obvious reference, but that's where all of this work comes from. It comes from a very personal viewpoint of, these are my people too, and I love them. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to honor the woman that held my hand, and that's what I look at. That's where all this is coming from. I began the fingerprint work after witnessing police arresting young, unhoused men and boys in my neighborhood. The imbalance of power dynamic was jarring. I started making the fingerprints to reclaim power taken from us by those who collect fingerprints. I continue to use my right index finger to create a multiplicity of different colors, tonal ranges, and marks. I use color and pressure to create unique patterns that will eventually create a whole. Collectively, we all have fingerprints, but each set is unique to a single person. The making of these fingerprinted works is a celebration of the individual and the collective. I love cosplay. I love odd things that are on the edges. I love, that's my real influence is people that are doing what they love, regardless of how cool or where it places them. So I went online and I Googled this, how to make this, and all the materials I use, a lot of them, it's a warble vase, which has a flexibility to it. So that's a cosplay material. It's also, a special effects Hollywood material, and I just love that. I love mixing them together, and it's so much fun. And I found one man in particular who was on the web, and he pointed everyone, in a direction of how to make this pattern strong enough and how to look for other patterns in this one book in the New York Public Library, and he gave the skew, and just full of love and respect for that kind of passion. And the theory with mirror armor, it was not only for metallic protection, but it was also to bounce back the evil from the onslaught or the attacker. And so I love that. And when I was in New York City and living there, I spent hours in the museum looking at the Met, looking at their collections and trying to get ideas. And during that time, I had my DNA done. It turns out I'm nearly a quarter Asian, and Mongolian specifically. And if you know anything about Mongolia, it's right up in between Russia and China. And so there's a great influence of a lamellar armor from China and Mongolia. So my people would have made this in both Germany and Mongolia, and then I found a little connection, and so a life connection. So I understand it better, and I'm just trying to, take something from myself and give it as protection. I was doing this chair, and it was seated right where you are now, standing right where you are, and I was on the floor, and this took an enormous amount of time and energy. I found it on the street. It was a castaway, and I loved it. So I brought it home. I Googled online how to paint a chair because it was red. And I wanted the pins to stand out, so I wanted to make it white or whitish. And the paints that I use from Home Depot are Storms Are Coming and Focus, and this is full circle. So both this and the Princeton show are pretty much full circle moments for me in that regard, and it's pretty amazing to make it mean something, and to honor the people who helped get me through it.
Hi, my name's Josh Knoblich, and welcome to part of my studio. I'm a sculptor and kind of an arts purveyor of arts and culture and things. I'm a sculptor by trade. That's part of my early education was sculpture, and I've done a few things since then, but most of them are all sort of art related. I think it was my third year of college. A friend of mine said, "Hey, I found this class called casting and welding," and I was like, "Oh, that sounds really interesting." And took one sculpture class, and I was like, "Oh shit! Like this is the thing that can bridge like all of that theoretical stuff and the literature and all of that, and then kind of like re-engage my hands and my sort of engineer brain in that side." So that sort of spawned this sort of redirection, I guess, and I kind of doubled down on the sculpture thing and wound up staying in college and getting a sculpture degree on top of my theater degree. So I have 2 BAs, and that's where it ended for me. I came from a family of engineers, makers. Both my one grandfather was an inventor and an engineer and worked for the circus and had a lot to do with their train systems and all of that. My other grandfather had a historic preservation construction company, so churches, barns, that sort of thing. So I sort of grew up in those kind of the trades and being able to think through problems and fixing stuff yourself and things. And, to me, it's all pieces parts, right? It's like everything, the whole world is just made of bips and bobs that you can order out of a catalog. So it's, in a way, you sort of like deconstruct it all, and everything's the same. It's like there's like a weird, people that work in industrial kitchens or just kitchens in general, right? It's like a very similar process. You're taking something, you're running a reductive process over it, you're kind of reconfiguring it into pieces parts, and then assembling those pieces parts into the final thing. Whether it's a piece of furniture, whether it's like a pot of noodles, it's whatever it is. It's like you've taken something, you've adjusted it, and then reintroduced it into a new life. So the piece in the show, I have a love of old machinery. I don't know, there's just something about like the stuff that's been used and the stuff that was made sort of in this like ideological era of when everything was made out of steel, so to speak, or made to last. A lot of the machines that we run are anywhere from 80 to 150 years old. And those machines we can work on ourselves. You can just order the part in the catalog when it breaks. It's just a bearing, you take the size, you get a new one. And there's something special to me about using that old equipment to kind of create these new things. Something about drill presses, I don't know what it is, but I just sort of began to get really interested in drill presses, so I started collecting those, and I was challenged to make a piece of sculpture a couple years ago, and this is a piece that had been kind of rolling around my brain for a while, and I kind of wanted to take all the utility out of the object, right, and to kind of remove its original purpose, and kind of reimagine it as something else. And I love Walker Turner drill presses. They were made in Plainfield, New Jersey. There's just something about the industrial design of them that I think is like concise and slick, and I don't know, kind of really tells the design story of that era. So I started thinking about this. I like threes. Three's kind of a number for me. So I began to think about what if we had, a repetition of them, and I was at an auction and found a press table with 4 Walker Turners and a Powermatic in the middle. The table was totally awesome, and the thing was like $300 or whatever. So I bought that, we brought them home, and then I kind of sat around and sketched and thought and looked, and that took a few months. And then when I was challenged to make this piece of work, I was like, this is what we're gonna do. So so I don't know. I think the piece came out, it was to me it was pretty successful. There's a few things and tweaks I would probably change on it, and most of that's like in the finish of certain parts of it, and work's not done until you say it's done, so who knows. We may get my changes affected to it before it's displayed with you guys, but maybe not. Maybe it's for the next one.
I'm Robert Cutt, and we're here in my studio in Jersey City. I'm a metal sculptor, working mostly steel. My work, I try to take forms of nature and kind of abstract them. I try to play with scale and balance, and I take large pieces of steel, segment it, weld it back together to create my soft kind of flowing curvy things, and then do a welded coated texture on the top. And this is where it all happens. I've been a full-time artist for my whole adult life. And for the first 20 years of my career, I worked in ceramics and could never really achieve the scale that I wanted. So I took one metal sculpting class at University of Arts in Philadelphia, and it changed my life. With steel, when you weld something together, it's finished. That's the end of the process. There's no drying, there's no shrinking. It's instant and permanent. It's not fragile. And that's how the whole steel thing came about. So this is one of the pieces for the show. It's inspired by what pollen looks like under a microscope and blown up like 20,000 times from its actual size. And it's made by little pieces of steel rods, welded together, textured on the inside and the outside. When I start a piece, I rarely draw out first. I kind of have an image in my head, and after working with steel for so long, I know kind of how steel reacts throughout the whole process. And so I have my concept, but I try to have enough forgiveness range in my concept that when the steel starts doing its own twisting and warping, that I kind of have my direction and I have the direction the steel wants to go, and we kind of marry those two and end up with what we end up with.
Do you have a construction hat?
Yes.
Because it's a working studio. Hi, my name is Jamie Learhoff-Levine, and I am a multidisciplinary artist with a focus on sculpture. And I explore materials, which is very, very important in my journey to make art. Oh my goodness, I made dioramas when I was 5 years old in my room for hours with shoe boxes. And I would put little mice, baby mice in there, and bugs, and frogs, and birds that fell out of trees. They didn't make it, but I tried to, I make little installations actually. And I would stay in my room for hours doing that. And I'm still doing it, just a little bit bigger. These works are early works, and they really translate for me the contrasts and the parallels of animal and human. And I think an overarching theme in my work is fragility and vulnerability, and I try to bring that to the viewer. I've been doing hybrids for so many years, and I feel this deep connection to the animal world. And that's where I'm at. Oh my gosh, you should have been with me. We would have had a ball. That time was super special. I had no idea what I was going to make in France. And it turned out to be something magical. That's my best work.
What you doing?
They're making it's a video of me. This is my daughter, my best friend, my best work. So I have 4 children, and they're represented with these porcelain sculptures, and each one is a little different, and they're meditative pieces. So while I was making them, I was thinking about the child I was making it for. And I'll tell you that I do like to work with different materials. Porcelain is its own animal. It is not easy to harness. I'm a grandma, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a wild thing. I'm a woman.
There's a bunch that's good. Let's put it that way. My name is Robert Loeb. I'm a sculptor. I live in New York, and my studio is in New Jersey, and my work comes from, over the years, from New Jersey, from the woods and mountains alongside the Appalachian Trail in Sussex County, New Jersey. And also over the years, I've worked in Kings Bluff, outside the Lincoln Tunnel. So I hammer aluminum around rocks and trees in the forest. I came about this process in a very circuitous way. I was interested in tactile art. I was interested in art happenings in the late 60s, and participatory pieces of sculpture where the viewer could move individual elements of the sculpture with their feet and their hands and change the way the sculpture looked. My first exhibition was at the Whitney Museum in the anti-illusion show, Procedures and Materials. After that, my work was sort of like grew vertically with some of the same ideas, but you could really only touch them with your eyes. So they were still very tactile. But my emphasis was on feeling the surfaces and understanding the volumetric qualities of the sculptures. That inspired me to, instead of, I had already been using rocks to inspire the forms and shapes of my art. And the reason I did that is because I didn't want to start just churning around the same old ideas in my head on paper and making sketches of the same old diagrams and plans. I didn't want to plan my sculpture. I wanted it to be found and spontaneous. And that's the tactile quality of sculpture. What I enjoy about nature is the experience of discovery. Exploring the woods has become like exploring my mind. I never know what's there, and I find things that I never expected, and that's what I like about nature.
Hello, my name is Philip A. Robinson Jr. I'm a multimedia sculptor, fine artist, currently working in wood and metal. People always ask me how I started. Funny thing is, I actually started in ceramics way back in undergraduate. Loved doing it, loved working with my hands, but just could not create the type of pieces that I wanted to create, just didn't have the knowledge yet. And so I moved towards sculpture and really got into metalwork in undergrad. I worked on that, and then when I got to graduate school, continued my love for metal all the way through graduate school. When I got out, I just did not have a foundry or ventilation, the right studio, the right equipment to continue working in metal. And so I shifted towards wood and really worked in wood for the next 13 to 15 years. I'm exploring the nuances of wood, how to put wood together, different types, different qualities. And then about maybe 4 years ago, I was really thinking to myself, I really love metal. I want to get back to the metal. So I started to join the metal back with the wood that I was already currently working on. I derive my inspiration from a multitude of areas, but what's most important for me is representation. Representation has always been key in my work, but also having an understanding of the lineage that involves not only myself, my family history, but also the material that I use. And I utilize the history of wood within my work. I utilize a term called dendrochronology, which is the dating of wood. So quite simply counting the rings of wood, the rings that are in a piece of wood or lumber, to know the age of which that piece of wood is. And so if you know where that piece is sourced, whether it be in the tri-state area, whether it be on the West Coast, you can really tell a historical timeline between when that piece was being grown, now being sourced and repurposed into the piece that you see today. The three pieces in the Morris Museum, entitled The Old Talks of New Icons, was a series derived from this idea of, one, clothing being non-binary, being able to see yourself in any article of clothing, no matter what age, what gender, what race. You're physically able to walk up to the piece and see yourself reflected in the figure. The idea of Old Talks with New Icons came from this idea of just wanting to see yourself represented in spaces where you normally wouldn't see yourself in. Having a tailored suit from Tom Ford, maybe not being able to afford that, but wanting to see what you would look like in that space. Ballerina, the hijab, all these different areas of trying to putting yourself in that person's space or identity to really see what that's like to walk in that path.
I'm Judy Tavel. I live in Rumson, New Jersey, where I have my studio, and I am a sculptor that works with clay as the basis of my work currently, and I paint it and I draw on it with graphite, and then I seal it with varnish. And the work is biomorphic in feeling and abstract as well. So I found clay about 22 years ago. I had been a fashion designer. I basically was trying to find my mojo with art again, and outside of the fashion design world, where I was working as the head designer for Lilly Pulitzer, and I was doing everything from the silhouette design to the actual print design. So drawing has always been a huge part of my practice. And when I found clay in 2002, I definitely always treated the pieces a little bit like a form that focused on line. And even when I was doing functional work, I would tend to make the work shift and change, and there was always line involved, similar to the drawing that I did previously when I did the print design, and just as I was growing up, I was always drawing. I ended up making this biomorphic sculpture that in a lot of ways is line as form and form as line. It's very much about drawing in space and also focusing on a feeling or a concept of something I'm trying to say in each piece. It was really speaking to the concept of entanglement and connection that I wanted to really focus on in my work. My inspiration comes from the physical world as well as psychological and cultural input. So the work in the show are 5 different pieces that have been created at different times over the past several years, but they're all speaking to, again, connection and entanglement, and they give off a certain level of energy. Entangle, which is the large piece that sits on a low pedestal, was actually made from 3 pieces that were then adhered together after the firing. And it has a sense of scale that allows one to feel very close to it, almost like a small human. And that to me is very interesting in work, to be able to get a vibe off of something that feels like, oh, is it coming towards me? Is it wrapping around me? This kind of thing. Traverse is made from 5 individual ceramic sculptures that are brought together to form a flowing sense of one sculpture. And the pieces have a lot of different individual lines that entangle, but so do the actual physical clay portions of the work. And it's meant to give more of a feeling of movement. So you basically follow your eye through the piece, and there could be a continuum after that, albeit inferred. And then around 2020, well, actually a little bit before that, I turned 50, and I decided that, I needed to relook at things and do whatever it is I want to do with the rest of my time here, however short or long it may be, as a creative.
Super blessed, super blessed, super blessed. I love it here every day. Every day it feels like my birthday. Every day. Yeah. Yay. Oh God, super blessed, super blessed.
All right, cool. Hi, I'm Katie Truck. Thank you so much for being in my studio at Grounds for Sculpture in Hamilton, New Jersey. How blessed am I? Grounds for Sculpture. I work in pantyhose. I work with wire and pantyhose, and I do a lot of sewing. I've been working strictly just with pantyhose since '99. Before that, I went to school for ceramics and all sorts of mixed media stuff, and when I graduated, I found it really difficult. I had always had a love for pantyhose. I was always trying to incorporate it with neon and ceramics, and nothing ever worked. And so when I graduated, I just started playing with the pantyhose with eggs, and then I just got rid of the eggs and was just sewing. And sewing is something that I used to do all the time in the summer times anyway with my family, like my grandma. And so it's one of those things that is very zen-like to me, very not frustrating and enjoyable. So that's how it all began. And since it's I'm really lucky, I should say, that back when I started in the 90s working with pantyhose, you couldn't get a lot of colors. And everything was beige and black and white, and sometimes I'd have to go to certain boutiques to get different kinds of colors. So I could dye them at that point, but I also had to be careful because they were also not fade resistant in UV. So they would turn different shades if you put them in the window, which was frustrating, but then fashion caught up with all of us, and before you know it, people were wearing light blue and green and all these wonderful colors. So I don't have to dye my pantyhose anymore, I buy them all. And I like to open up packages and touch them to see how much spandex and stuff is in them. Like I like to see how much, when it's ultra sheer, those are gonna tear apart like crazy, so I stay away from them. But I'm always very thankful when people think of me and they give me their old pantyhose. It's such a blessing. So I'm always very thankful when people are like, hey, I have a drawer full of hose, do you want them? I'm like, yeah. Because you'd be surprised at what colors people have, or they've hidden, or they bought for a special occasion. That will then inspire me for the future, which is really great. I tend to think of my works as little droplets of water, little microcosms. I really loved science when I was in high school, so I found that when I looked under microscopes, it was always amazing what little worlds were going on. So that's kind of the vibe that I go for each one of my pieces, is kind of having like a little world. What are you looking at? What kind of like organism or some kind of chemical reaction or biological reaction or anything like that is going on. So for me, taking this man-made substance, and I'm trying to constantly bring it back to kind of an organic vibe through color, things like that. There's a smattering of different pieces that are going to be in the show. This is September, which came from my year series, and my father was diagnosed with cancer and given a year to live. So I was like, and I had a show coming up, and I was trying to wrap my head around what a year feels like. So I have this box of scraps that I always have, every time I cut off a piece of pantyhose, I put it in my scrap box. I started making all these shapes with the scraps, and then when the box was empty, I took those and then put them in each month. So I had 12 months, and then I would embellish the months so that they felt like that month. I wanted it to feel like the month that I was trying to, vision in my head. This is September, which will be in the show. And to me, what I love about this, September's my birthday month. I'm a Virgo. And I want to try to put in things that remind me of September, like the sapphire, like school buses. When I still think of everything starting to turn orange and starting to kind of die off and things of that nature. So that's kind of the vibe that I went with September. So yeah, so I've been working strictly with pantyhose for 24 years plus. How did I get this age? So yeah, that is how I began.